Friends, Jesus has been raised from the dead. He's gone on ahead of you. You will see him again. That's it. That's the first Easter sermon, right? The story isn't over. And fear and great joy, that's the first Easter response. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, women who were with Jesus throughout his ministry, who were with him as he died, who were there watching as he was buried, have come back to grieve at the tomb. Now we know that Mary Magdalene was a dear friend and valued disciple of Jesus. And some people think that the other Mary was Mary of Nazareth, Jesus' mama. And that Matthew doesn't specify her identity, maybe because he wants to highlight her new role as disciple instead of mother. Come on, Matthew, you know we can do it all, right? We don't know for sure, but it makes sense to me as a mama that she would be there as close as she could get in her grief, right? These were the people who loved Jesus the most, who were faithful from the beginning to the end, and Jesus' death must have seemed to them like their world was over. But instead of finding a quiet place to grieve near the body of their beloved, when they arrive at his tomb, as Matthew tells it, the earth shakes, an angel comes down from heaven, opens the tomb, and scares the big, bad Roman guards into paralysis, then gives Mary and Mary the incredible news of resurrection, along with a commission to preach that good news to the rest of the disciples. And this changes everything. The whole world shifts, which is maybe what Matthew's getting at with the earthquake imagery. That the story isn't over. The women left the tomb with fear and great joy. Now, you might have to use your imaginations a little bit to conjure up Matthew's images of the great earthquake and the huge stone being rolled away and the supernatural lightning-clad messenger from God, right? But the women's response, fear and great joy, you know exactly what that feels like. I know that you do. It's the same feeling that we get when our world shifts, when it feels like the ground is moving beneath us, when everything changes, when we know that our story isn't over, but we're not quite sure what's on the other side. We may not get an earthquake or a visit from an angel this Easter, but I think that the signs of resurrection are all around us still. And when those feelings of fear and great joy hold hands in our lives, as they did for the Marys that first Easter morning, that might be our clue. Pay attention. Our sign of resurrection. It's like falling in love, right? The fear of being vulnerable and getting hurt, and the great joy of being seen and known. When you fall in love, everything changes. New possibilities open up, new dreams, new plans arise. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning. Or it's like becoming parents. Parents, you know that mix of joy and fear is intense, right? Can I get an amen? Yes. When that little life arrives, completely helpless and dependent on you, your whole life changes. Parts of your life that were important before die, and new parts of you are born. You're still you, but you're transformed, right? Your story isn't over. It's just changing. Maybe it's like watching your kids grow up. The fear and joy of dropping them off at kindergarten for the first time, then teaching them how to drive, then holding them through their first heartbreak, and cheering for them as they leave the nest. Their story isn't over, and your story isn't over, but it is changing, right? Sometimes we get this resurrection feeling of fear and great joy when we leave a toxic relationship, whether with an abusive partner or a harmful church or an exploitative friendship, it's scary to leave what you know, even when you're being hurt. But there's hope and joy that there's something else on the other side, right? Your story isn't over. It's just changing. Many of you have felt this mix of joy and fear as you embraced and proclaimed your full and true identity, your queerly beloved self, your whole and holy trans self, as you've claimed your own goodness just as you are. That's scary. As you've come out, as you've transitioned into the bright unknown, your story isn't over. It's just changing. You know the feeling of resurrection all those times throughout your life that your worldview has shifted. When you've been confronted with a new truth that couldn't help but change your life, change the way that you see things, the way that you show up in the world, whether it was becoming a feminist or recognizing your privilege or seeing the underside of our violent history in the U.S., or coming to terms with the incredible damage that the church, Big C, has done in so many communities, including ours. It's scary when the scales fall off our eyes, and it changes everything. But your story isn't over. It's just changing. It's the feeling you get when you're the underdog fighting for justice. We know about this in Texas. Or even watching and cheering on others who are in the fight. I think about Justin Jones and Justin Pearson, lawmakers in Tennessee who were expelled from the state legislature last week after peacefully protesting for gun reform alongside their constituents. Their story isn't over. It's just beginning, right? I think about the migrant parents who've crossed oceans and jungles and borders and the very edges of life and death to get their families to safety. Their story isn't over. It's changing, though. Some of you know this feeling from a time you were facing illness, when your body seemed to fail you, when you were recovering from an accident or a surgery, learning how to walk again. Fear and great joy. But your story wasn't over, even if it was changing. And I suspect that this is what we feel at the end of our lives as well. That resurrection pair of fear and great joy. I know that this is the feeling that many people have when their loved ones pass away. The fear of how to be in the world without them, how to go on. And the deep joy of knowing that their suffering is over, that they're okay. Regardless of religion or doctrine or faith or lack of faith, in my experience, when people that we love are dying, those around them know and believe somehow that their story isn't over. It's just changing. And this is our hope of resurrection today, beloveds. As far-fetched and distant as the story of angels and earthquakes can sometimes feel, the truth is that resurrection is written all over our lives, all through our hearts, all around our world. It's as close as falling in love, as present as watching our bodies heal, as sure as our first and last breaths. I don't know how resurrection works or exactly what's on the other side. And that's kind of the point, right? That we'll face it together in all of our fear and all of our joy, because the good news of Jesus Christ is that even in death, our story isn't over. It just changes. In the meantime, may our fear and great joy propel us to action, to proclamation, just like it did for Mary and Mary, who run to tell the other disciples the good news that first Easter morning, and whose adrenaline runs them right into Jesus, who suddenly meets them on their way. Beloveds, may we pay attention to the resurrection moments in our lives and in our world. And may we watch for the risen Jesus who will meet us on the way. Thanks be to God. Amen.